Good afternoon, everybody. Hope you're having a fantastic day. Today, we are going to be looking at Brexit and how it's going to affect trade over the next kind of 12 months or so. So if you're interested in this sort of content, make sure you are subscribed with your notifications turned on. Let's get into the video straight away. Many of you woke up this morning. In the UK, it's the 1st of February 2020. Many of you woke up crying, scared, not knowing what the future holds, because we have officially left the EU. If you are in the UK, you're out of the EU. And if you didn't know that, then you've probably been living under a rock and probably not even watching this video. So now that we have officially left the EU, we are going into something called a transition period. So what I want to talk to you about is the effects of Brexit on trade over the next few months. And at the end of the video, I will be discussing the 3 potential outcomes. So the first thing that you need to understand before we even go any further is that although that we have left the EU as of today, we're in something called a transition period. Now, the transition period will potentially last up until the 31st of December 2020, so this year, but potentially it could also go on longer than that, which I'll get into a little bit later in the video. So what is the transition period? It's also known as the implementation period as well. During this time, it basically means that we still have to abide by the EU rules. However, we don't really have voting power. This means that most things will stay the same until the end of the transition period. So things like free movement, so that you can go to France, you can go to Spain or whatever. So you can still have that free movement of people, free movement of goods, and also things like driving licenses and passports. All of that is going to stay the same until the end of the transition period. So you don't have to worry about, am I able to travel to France tomorrow? Am I still going to be able to go on holiday in July? Or are my customers in Germany not going to be able to get my products in time? Or are they going to have to pay any tariffs? You don't have to worry about anything until, first of all, there's an actual deal or no deal in place for things like trade or any one of these things that you're actually interested in, and actually until the end of the transition period. There's obviously so many things that need to be negotiated and so many plans that need to be put in place, systems that need to be changed. One of the big ones, which is a huge one, is the UK-EU trade deal. Now, this is a big deal, right? Pun intended, because literally around 49% of the UK trade is done with the EU. So out of all the trade that the UK does with the whole entire world, 49% of that, about half, is within the EU. And that accounts for about 637 billion pounds a year in trade. So this isn't some small thing. This isn't some like, oh, we're just going to stick this at the end of the deal. This is a huge, huge, huge thing. Just like free movement of people, we have so many people traveling the borders all the time. This is going to be a huge topic. So when you hear on the news about trade deals, this is what they're talking about. So the reason why a trade deal is so important is currently there are no tariffs to pay when you're importing goods or you're exporting goods between, say, the UK, France, Germany, etc. And that's because we have this EU deal. In kind of layman terms, that means that if you want to send something to a friend or a relative in Germany, they're not going to have to pay any tariffs, which is another way of saying like a tax, like a customs duty. On the flip side of that, when I import goods from China, I'm paying tariffs, okay? So I'm paying things like customs duty and VAT to import those goods into the EU currently. So if we didn't have a free trade deal with the EU, that means that if you wanted to import something from, let's say, Germany into the UK, then there may be tariffs to pay, whereas now there isn't. So the first thing, the big thing is that we need to come up with a deal, a trade deal with the EU. So ideally we can have free movement of goods just like we do now. However, the other huge negotiation that needs to happen is deals with other countries like the US or Australia. Now, because we have this independence from the EU, we're able to strike up these deals with other countries without having the EU kind of butt their noses in. Some people say this may be great for the economy. Some people say this will be terrible for the economy. And I think the only thing you can really be sure is that you don't know until it happens. So at the end of the transition period, so once we get to the 31st of December, 2020, end of this year, we will reach the end of the transition period. At that point, there are 3 potential outcomes that you need to be aware of. The first outcome is that the UK and the EU come to a trade agreement and the deal starts to be implemented. Okay, so we transition over to that new way of operating, whatever that may be. That's the first outcome, and that's pretty much the one that we want. So the second outcome is that the UK exits without a trade deal with the EU, which means that then we will be put onto something called WTO, World Trade Organization terms. And this means that any goods that are imported, exported to and from the UK will be subject to tariffs. And importantly, it doesn't mean that this is going to be forever. There still may be a deal that can be done in the future, but it does mean that on the 1st of January 2021, we will be on World Trade Organization terms. We don't want that to happen. This is generally not a good thing. Okay, I would say that out of the three options, this is the worst option. So the third option is that the UK fails to negotiate a deal. However, we are granted an extension. Now, here's the thing with the extension. If we were to get an extension on the transition period, it has to be done by the 1st of July 2020. So that's just 5 months from today. If an extension was granted, it can be extended by 12 or 24 months. So potentially this transition period could go on till December 31st, 2022. However, old Boris has said that under no circumstances he would ever allow that, and it would not pass in Parliament. The only thing is, I don't really trust politicians, so that's still an option. So just to cover those three things, at the end of the transition period, we either leave with a trade deal and we continue doing deals, we continue free movement of goods, or whatever the hell they decide and they negotiate. The second option is that at the end of the transition period, we go on to the World Trade Organization terms, which is ideally not going to be a good thing. The third option is that they can't negotiate in time and we have to be able to have an extension on the transition period. So for you, if you do import goods into the UK or you move them around the EU, this is something that you really want to keep your finger on the pulse with. You want to keep your ear to the ground. How can you do that? First thing you want to do is subscribe to this channel, turn on the notification bell. So when things do happen, I will be providing updates. Come July, I'll probably do more updates. If there are any negotiations that happen and any deals particularly made, again, I will be putting out content for that so I can share it with you guys and try to put it into layman's terms so that everyone can understand. The other thing I would do is just keep an eye on the news. If you see anything with trade deal, and if it's particularly trade that you're interested in, then just go and read that article or look at that video. If you have enjoyed this video and you found it valuable, you found it useful, it'd be great if you could smash that thumbs up button, leave any questions that you have down below in the comments, share this with someone who you think will find it valuable as well. Make sure you are subscribed with your notifications turned on, and remember, you're just one product away. Bye-bye.